What about professional boundaries?
Oh, those are vital for work-life balance, especially in today's always-on culture. It's about setting clear work hours, communicating effectively with colleagues, and recognizing that our worth isn't solely tied to our productivity.
Yeah, it's so easy for work to bleed into our personal lives, but those boundaries help us maintain that separation and prevent burnout.
Spring emphasizes the importance of having time to recharge, to pursue passions outside of work. It's about creating that sense of wholeness and balance.
And it seems like setting boundaries across all of these dimensions, the physical, the emotional, the digital, and the professional, ultimately leads to a more fulfilling life. A life that's more aligned with our values and priorities. Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're tackling something that might seem simple on the surface, but believe me, it's way more complex and fascinating than it first appears. We're diving into the world of boundaries, and to guide us, we're turning to an article by holistic life coach Violet Spring.
It's really interesting how she approaches this whole concept of boundaries right from the start.
Oh yeah. How so?
Well, she uses this metaphor of boundaries as bridges, not walls. And that really just kind of reframes the whole conversation.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. It's like instead of thinking about boundaries as these rigid barriers that shut people out, we're thinking about them as pathways to connect in healthier ways.
Exactly. It's about creating that structure for positive engagement.
Yeah.
Respecting ourselves and others.
It's not just about saying no all the time.
Right. It's about communication and clarity. It's about setting those expectations and needs up front, so everyone's on the same page.
And Spring outlines some pretty compelling benefits of setting these boundaries. She mentions self-protection, clarity in relationships, empowerment, and healthier relationships overall.
And each of those benefits kind of ties into this idea of well-being, Like, take self-protection, for example. We've all been there, right? Saying yes to things that drain us, leaving us feeling resentful and exhausted.
Oh yeah, totally. I'm definitely guilty of that.
Well, boundaries are like the shield against those energy vampires. They help us prioritize our time and resources so we can actually show up as our best selves.
It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. We need to take care of ourselves first in order to truly give to others.
And when we set those boundaries, we also gain clarity in our relationships. We're communicating those expectations clearly, so there's less room for misunderstandings and conflict.
It's like we're setting the stage for more positive interactions right from the get-go.
Exactly. And with that clarity comes a sense of empowerment. We're no longer swayed by guilt or the need to please others. We're making decisions that align with our values, and that feels incredibly freeing.
It's like we're reclaiming our agency, stepping into that space of true authenticity.
And all of these benefits, they culminate in healthier relationships overall. When there's mutual respect, clear communication, and that foundation of trust, the relationships just naturally flourish.
So it's this ripple effect, right? This one act of setting boundaries can positively impact so many different aspects of our lives.
Spring actually goes on to break down the different dimensions of boundaries. There's the physical, the emotional, the digital, and the professional. Each one with its own unique nuances and challenges.
Let's start with physical boundaries. I think most people associate this with personal space, like that invisible bubble we have around us.
Yeah.
But Spring takes it a step further.
Oh, absolutely. She talks about time management organization and even that physical space where we work or live, creating that sense of order and peace in our environment.
It's like those physical boundaries create a container for us to thrive both mentally and physically.
Exactly. And then we have emotional boundaries, which I think can be a bit trickier for some people to navigate.
Oh, for sure. It's about being aware of our feelings, trusting our gut, and recognizing when we need to step back from situations or people that drain us emotionally.
Yes. It's about understanding that we're not responsible for other people's emotions and that we have a right to protect our own energy.
And this definitely ties into the whole digital world we live in. Spring talks about digital boundaries, right?
She does. It's about being mindful of how much time we spend online, how we engage with social media, and setting those limits to protect our attention and mental space.
Especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with information and notifications. It's so easy to get sucked into that vortex.
It's like setting those digital boundaries creates a filter, allowing us to be more intentional about what we consume and how we connect.
So we've covered physical, emotional, and digital. What about professional boundaries?
Oh, those are vital for work-life balance, especially in today's always-on culture. It's about setting clear work hours, communicating effectively with colleagues, and recognizing that our worth isn't solely tied to our productivity.
Yeah, it's so easy for work to bleed into our personal lives, but those boundaries help us maintain that separation and prevent burnout.
Spring emphasizes the importance of having time to recharge, to pursue passions outside of work. It's about creating that sense of wholeness and balance.
And it seems like setting boundaries across all of these dimensions, the physical, the emotional, the digital, and the professional, ultimately leads to a more fulfilling life, a life that's more aligned with our values and priorities.
It's about taking back control and honoring our needs. And that's where Spring's article gets really practical. She provides a framework for actually implementing these boundaries.
So how do we actually start putting these concepts into action?
Well, she starts with the foundation of clear communication. She makes it clear that, boundaries can't be effective if others don't know what they are. It's all about expressing our needs directly and without blaming others.
So how do we do that? How do we communicate these boundaries effectively?
Spring suggests using I statements. It's about owning our feelings and stating our limits in a way that respects both ourselves and the other person.
Can you give us an example? Like, what would that sound like in a real life situation?
Sure. Let's say you have a friend who's constantly asking for favors that you just don't have the time or energy for.
Yeah, I've been there.
Instead of saying something like, "You're always asking me to do things," which can come across as accusatory, you could try something like, "I care about you, but I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed right now. I need to prioritize my own commitments."
That's much better.
Yeah.
It's assertive, but also compassionate.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that setting boundaries is often an ongoing conversation. It's not about drawing a hard line in the sand. Things can change. Our needs can change.
So it's about being flexible and adapting our boundaries as needed.
Exactly. Spring really emphasizes the importance of self-awareness in this whole process.
Yeah.
We need to tune into our feelings and recognize when our boundaries are being tested.
It's like having that internal compass that tells us when something feels off, even if we can't quite articulate it.
Yes. And once we recognize that feeling, it's about having the courage to maintain those limits, even when it's uncomfortable.
Because let's be real, setting boundaries can be tough, especially when we're dealing with people who are used to us always saying yes.
Absolutely. It might take practice, and we might need to reiterate those boundaries multiple times, but it's important to stand firm.
It sounds like setting boundaries is more of a journey than a destination.
Exactly. Spring reminds us that we're not aiming for perfection. It's about learning and growing along the way and giving ourselves grace when we stumble.
Because, let's face it, we're all going to stumble at some point. We're human.
And it's important to recognize that not everyone is going to be happy when we start setting those limits. We might encounter some pushback or resistance.
That makes sense. People can get pretty comfortable with the status quo. Change can be unsettling.
So how do we handle those situations where our boundaries aren't exactly met with enthusiasm?
Yeah, what's the best approach?
Well, Spring suggests staying calm, reiterating our boundaries clearly, and most importantly, avoiding the trap of justifying our needs or apologizing for setting limits.
It's about holding our ground with compassion, but also with firmness.
Right. We have a right to have needs and boundaries. And sometimes that might even require setting consequences.
Consequences? What do you mean by that?
Well, if someone consistently disrespects our boundaries, we might need to take a step back. Maybe limit contact, end the conversation, or even distance ourselves from that person altogether.
It sounds like consequences are a way of protecting ourselves. When our boundaries aren't being honored, we need to take action.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we have a right to create a safe and respectful space for ourselves, even if it means letting go of relationships that are no longer serving us.
I can imagine that's a really difficult decision to make, especially if it involves people we care about.
It can be incredibly challenging. But Spring reminds us that sometimes walking away is the healthiest choice, even if it's painful in the short term.
She also talks about the importance of self-care throughout this whole process.
Oh, absolutely. Setting boundaries can be draining, especially in the beginning. It's crucial to replenish our energy reserves and engage in activities that nourish us emotionally, physically, mentally.
It's like we need to fill our own cup first before we can pour into others.
Exactly. Self-care isn't selfish. It's essential for maintaining healthy boundaries and showing up as our best selves in all areas of our lives.
And it's not something we have to do alone. Spring also emphasizes the importance of seeking support, right? Having people in our corner who understand and respect our boundaries.
Yes. Whether it's a therapist, a trusted friend, or support group, having those people we can confide in can make a world of difference.
It's like having a cheerleading squad, reminding us of our worth and encouraging us to stand strong.
And they can also offer a fresh perspective, helping us see situations more clearly and make decisions that align with our values.
One of the biggest challenges for a lot of people is saying no. It can feel so uncomfortable, especially for those of us who are natural people pleasers.
Yeah, I know it's a common struggle, but Spring offers some great advice for overcoming that hurdle. She reminds us that saying no isn't selfish. It's a way of honoring our needs and limits.
And she even provides some helpful phrases that we can use when we're struggling to decline a request.
Oh yeah, like, I appreciate you thinking of me, but I'm not able to take that on right now. It's simple, direct, and you're not making excuses or giving lengthy explanations.
I like that. It leaves the door open for future collaborations. It's not a hard no, it's a not right now.
Exactly. Another good one is, that doesn't work for me, but thank you for offering. Again, polite but firm. No room for misinterpretation.
What I appreciate about these phrases is that they're not aggressive or confrontational. They're just stating a boundary in a calm and respectful way.
And Spring also encourages us to practice saying no in low-stakes situations to build up our confidence.
So it's like flexing that no muscle. The more we use it, the easier it becomes.
Exactly. And as we become more comfortable setting those smaller boundaries, we'll be better equipped to handle the bigger ones when they come up.
This has been so insightful. But I'm curious about that ripple effect that Spring mentions. How does setting boundaries impact our relationships beyond just those individual interactions?
It's a great question. And it's where things get really interesting. It's amazing how these personal boundaries can actually create positive change that extends beyond just ourselves, Spring really highlights that when we're clear about our boundaries, it actually fosters more trust and respect in our relationships.
That makes a lot of sense. I guess when people know what to expect from us, it builds a foundation for more genuine connections.
Exactly. And it's not just about the feel-good vibes either. Spring points to some tangible benefits like better communication, increased self-esteem, and even greater resilience.
So it's not just about feeling better, but actually equipping ourselves to handle challenges more effectively.
It's like those boundaries give us a stronger sense of self, and that strength just ripples outward, impacting everything we do.
It's so empowering to think about. It's like we're taking back control and creating a life that's truly aligned with what we value.
And remember, it's a journey. Spring reminds us that we're gonna have moments where we slip up. Maybe those people-pleasing tendencies resurface, or we feel that twinge of guilt for saying no.
It's comforting to know that it's not about being perfect, but about making progress and learning as we go.
Absolutely. And as we get better at setting and maintaining those boundaries, we'll start to see that ripple effect, not only in our own lives, but in the lives of those around us.
It's incredible to think about how something as simple as setting boundaries can create such a positive impact.
It reminds us that taking care of ourselves isn't selfish at all. It's actually a gift to the world. When we show up as our most authentic and empowered selves, it inspires others to do the same.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with a sense of hope and possibility. We've explored a roadmap, a set of tools to navigate the complexities of relationships and create a more fulfilling life.
And it all starts with that one fundamental act of setting boundaries. Boundaries that protect our energy boundaries, that foster healthy connections, and boundaries that allow us to live in alignment with who we truly are.
So for all our listeners out there, I want to leave you with a question to ponder. How might consciously setting boundaries in one area of your life positively affect other areas?
Could setting firmer boundaries at work lead to more quality time with loved ones? Could saying no to excessive commitments open up space for creativity or self-care? The possibilities are endless.
What a journey this has been. A big thank you to Violet Spring for her insightful work on this important topic.
And to you, our listeners, for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you'll continue to explore the power of boundaries and create a life that is truly authentic and fulfilling.
Until next time, keep diving deep, keep learning, and keep setting those boundaries.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like, leave a comment below, and be sure to subscribe and help us build this awesome holistic heroes tribe. And while you're waiting for new episodes, check out my other videos from these playlists.